There's two sections we wanted to play about discussing the mob and Nine Deuce jumping on Miles Farley. And then there's also a portion that discusses this song that Garlington had. And so let me get my notes and play that portion because it's different than the subject matter of the jail. So I'm going to play, Your Honor, 149 to 250 on PDF page 4082.
Fuck with that studio?
Yeah, I've been fucking around. I really just need to feel like the same shit, bro. Like a nigga just hopping on songs and shit. But I got a co-song by myself, but man, we got me and Cole got down. We got the little song. Man, these folks fucking with this motherfucker. We ain't dropped it yet, but we really gotta we gotta redo the shit so we can goddamn take the pain.
You know who? You know who?
I what?
You said who else on it with you?
Lil Cole, my cousin, we just got that.
That been hard.
And that motherfucker's too hard. Them folks, look, add dog back that motherfucker.
I'm gonna add dog back that motherfucker. Damn, man.
So, Your Honor, this specific portion is not this exercise with the wiretap started with specifically exclusively co-conspirator statements, but this really is for a non-hearsay purpose. And there is multiple calls where Garlington is discussing this song he made where there's like two versions. One version, he's like directly referencing and probably dissing Shell Kel. And so he keeps saying, I got to take his name out of it. So this is one of those. The state wasn't going to play or not intend to play multiple of those calls. So this specific portion is for a non-hearsay purpose of the way that Garlington is cognizant of what is in a song that's publicly released and how that can impact law enforcement. Because the general theme, and I don't have on the top of my head the other calls where he mentions this. I have them in my notes, but not readily accessible. He says stuff along the lines of if something happens to him. So he's like, we got to redo the song. We got to take his name out of it so that it's not as overt or clear in case something happens to him. And so that was the purpose of why the state wanted to introduce this. Whether he made the song or not make the song, I do not know. But the fact that he is discussing and aware of, don't say too much. Like he wants to make it realistic, but not too realistic because he can get in trouble if something happens to that person.
Okay.
So is this call off the sheet that was sent? Because I'm seeing on the screen it said 4062. On this it says 4082. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
You're correct, Mr. Schardt. It's reference number 4046, PDF page 4082, and there's two time hacks. So the 1 minute and 49 seconds to 2 minutes and 50 seconds was this portion. There's another portion that references what happens in the Fulton County Jail, but I just played the portion that because I wanted to highlight it's not a co-conspirator statement. The state's not alleging it's for a non-hearsay purpose.
Maybe it might be my eyes failing me. I thought when I just looked up at the screen, it said we were playing 4062.
No, it says 4082.
Okay, my eyes are failing me. Good to know. So I don't, again, having to change. We're not talking about Mr. Garlington saying, okay, I'm about to go harm as I understand it, Mr. Watts, or hey, let's plan to go harm Mr. Watts. From my understanding of the call and the explanation given by the state, it's I made a song and I need to take out references so if something happens to him, I don't get blamed for it. Not seeing the hearsay link, and certainly I understand that the state or the hearsay exception, but and I understand the state saying it's not hearsay, but Mr. Garlington saying I made a song with reference to Kelvin Watts. I don't know how that's not for the truth of the matter asserted. I mean, to make the point the state is trying to make, that lyrics need to be changed for it to make any sense to the jurors, they would have to accept the first part of that statement, which is I made a song with Kelvin Watts, references to Kelvin Watts in it. They would have to accept that for the truth of the matter asserted for any of this to make any sense. So I believe it is hearsay, and it doesn't fall under any exceptions.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to be objecting also, and maybe I'm wrong, but these conversations have to speak for themselves. It seems like the state would be violating 24-7-704B if they're relying on an investigator to come in and talk about the mens rea or the intent or the meaning of these words. I understand that an expert may be able to talk about a certain phrase or a code word, and that's under Blash, B-L-A-S-H versus State, 318 Georgia, 325. It's in Division 4, 898 Southeast 2D 522, 2024 case. But if what Mr. Adkins is saying is that the investigator, I'm assuming is Investigator Viverito, will be listening to a recording and then explaining to the juries the meaning, I have an objection to all of these. I know I have no standing because Mr. Williams is not on these wiretaps, so I've been relatively quiet, but I will be objecting that the investigator gives some overall closing argument for the prosecution to say this is what's going on. So I didn't want, and you're making rulings, and I wanted you to take that into consideration if you don't mind.
All right. Were you saying that one of the detectives or investigators is going to say, here's what all of this meant?
So, Your Honor, this wiretap and on the state's witness list, this evidence of the wiretap is in Detective Viverito's folder. So
Right.
she is who is going to be, we have the T3 custodian who is going to, the state intends to lay the foundation for admissibility.
Okay.
But these wiretaps will be introduced through or published when Investigator Viverito is on the stand.
Okay. But is she then going to interpret them?
So, Your Honor, could the state get back to the court in terms of I don't want to misspeak to the court about what, different members of the team prepare different witnesses. So I don't want to, if you can give me a brief moment in terms of I don't know exactly what Investigative Viverito is going to be testifying to. What I was referencing is in terms of who, for example, she's a gang expert who can rely on hearsay in terms of, as any expert can.
Yeah.
Who is Bob Smith? Bob Smith is XYZ, right? I know he's a member of this group because I personally seen him or arrested him or whatever she says. And I know it's different depending on what she's talking about. But in
Right.
terms of, I would like more time to accurately brief the court on this issue that Mr. Steele just brought up. If that's all right with the court.
Okay. But you hadn't already said that. I mean, that's
Said what part, Your Honor?
that your argument for this portion coming in didn't have anything to do with that, right?
Not for him change. No. And in terms of this specific clip, he doesn't use the word shell cow. So like this short 40-second term, I believe that's what he's referring to because of other wiretaps but we've obviously reduced the amount of wiretaps we're introducing. And so this, I believe this one kind of speaks for itself in terms of.
I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yes, Your Honor.
is you're just going to have the jury listen to this, and then you might argue later what it meant or didn't mean, but there's not going to be a witness who gives their rendition of what it meant or didn't mean.
For specifically this taking the name out of the song,
Yes.
I don't believe she was, and that's why I don't want to misspeak, because I don't,
Okay.
I will confirm, but the state's intent was, believes this specific portion of I need to take his name out of the song somewhat speaks for itself, but
All right. So then, Mr. Steele, I'm not sure I'm following your 704 objection.
I don't hear the word shall cal, so I assume that somebody, the state's going to have somebody, I assume it's the investigator, Viverito, say what they're talking about. And
Okay.
no witness can get into someone else's mental
Well, that's
state.
what I'm trying to get a handle on, is whether this is going to be some other witness who then says, here's what I think this meant, or whether the state's simply going to let the jury hear it and then later they're going to argue, here's the state's theory on this, because those are definitely two different things.
yes, Your Honor. And to be clear, I mean, what happens quite frequently, and APD gang detectives and investigator Viverito, who is listed as a gang expert, could discuss, is how what's said in songs, whether true or not true, impacts what happens in reality in terms of the cases, the shootings, someone dissing someone and what response. So if that the jury can combine evidence in the trial to make a determination. I do not believe investigator Viverito on this. We play this portion and she says, I'll tell you 100% Garlington's talking about shell kel, and the song was titled XYZ, and there was two versions. That's not what I understand she will be speaking about. I had to, on this specific point, and it might be because Mr. Garlington, was arrested at some point. That's, I don't know exactly what song he's talking about. It's just the fact that he's cognizant of and careful of what he puts in songs.
Okay.
So on that specific part, I wanted to make that part clear, Your Honor. And in terms of, yeah.
So we have this case where the district attorney gets in front of the press and says, Mr. Williams shouldn't have been putting these things in songs.
Okay, well,
And then-
what the district attorney said in front of the press is not
Well-
come into this trial.
Well,
has it?
they're trying to use lyrics, but then when someone says, well, I should take lyrics out of a song in case something happens, then all of a sudden it's scandalous. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, how could Mr. Garlington, if it was relevant to anything, how could him saying, maybe I'll not put this song out here in case, not saying, oh, because we're about to do something to this man, in case something happens to this man, which it's not named, and so I don't want to take that away from Mr. Steele's argument. It is not named who that person is. Somehow that's indicative of guilt too. It's like,
Your Honor, are we allowed to, the court's question specifically regarding the 704 issue? I didn't understand Mr. Schart's response just now to speak directly to it. And I just want to make sure that we're addressing exactly what the court asked us to address just a moment ago. Could the court tell us in the context of what Mr. Schardt just said?
I don't think Mr. Schardt was addressing the 704. I think he was addressing what his earlier objection was, which is sort of, well, y'all heard it. I'm not going to rephrase it. Well, okay. And then I guess one thing that Mr. Schardt did say is, how is this really a non-hearsay purpose? Don't you have to sort of accept a part of it as for the truth.
So, Your Honor, the state, my understanding of this portion in terms of whether it's Garlington discussing removing words in a song. I'm not, he says it like definitively, I had to redo it and take his name out of it. So in my mind, the truth of the matter sir would be like Damekion Garlington changed the name and made a new version, but it's the way that he is cognizant of what he's saying and how it could implicate him. And part of, from the state's position and kind of what Mr. Schardt was alluding to is you want to get close to the line, but not, you don't want to say like, I went to 300 Main Street on May 4th at 2:42 p.m. in a red Corvette and I shot Bob Smith in the head. That's too obvious. You could get, if you actually did that. So you may say, you may allude to it, but you don't want to be so obvious with it that law enforcement says, well, yeah, we have you on camera in that exact same car at that exact same time. So it's a little bit of a gamesmanship in terms of publicly discredit someone else so that they know what you're talking about, but there's some plausible deniability if something happens to them where it's just a reference or a allusion to it. So, yes, Your Honor, you may.
I really been like,
Fuck with that studio.
yeah, I've been fucking around. I really just need to feel like the same shit, really, like a nigga just hopping on songs and shit. But I got a cover song by myself, but man, me and Cole got down. We got the little song. Man, these folks fucking with this motherfucker. We ain't dropped it yet, but we really gotta redo the shit so we can goddamn take the same.
You know who? You know who?
I what?
You said who else on it with you?
Lil Cole, my cousin, we just got that.
That been hard.
But that motherfucker's too hard. Them folks, add dog back that motherfucker.
I'm gonna add dog back that motherfucker. Damn, man. I'm ready to get on this. I got so much shit.
You do?
All right. I'm going to admit that